but also gives you a whole lot of other, maybe less intimidating information on your genetic background. For example, your ancestry. Before we get more into detail, let me briefly introduce to you 3 of the most fascinating women I have here to my side. Anne Wojcicki, do I pronounce it right?
Correct.
And Linda Avey, the 2 founders of 23andMe. And Esther Dyson, who has been introduced to you already by Steffi Czerny, who is on the board of directors of 23andMe together with Anne and Linda. Anne has a degree in biology and brings to the company 10 years of experience in healthcare investing, focused primarily on biotech companies. Linda Avey also has a degree in biology and over 20 years of experience in sales and business development in the biopharmaceutical industry. Esther Dyson has studied economics at Harvard, and she is an investor. Actually, last night we were talking in the blue bar, in the hot blue bar of Hotel Bayerischer Hof, which was even hotter than here. And Esther was saying that she is a retired investor, but she still seems very active to me. And also what she said, what I found was very interesting, she said, I promote stuff before people really understand. And once they do understand, I start to get bored. So I think even at the risk of boring Esther, would you, Linda and Anne, briefly outline what your company is really doing? And then I would like to pass the word to Esther, who will tell us why she thinks companies like 23andMe can also advance the scientific progress. And then I think we should open the discussion so that anyone gets the chance to ask a question. Okay.
So it's,
okay.
Is this on? Can you guys hear me? No? So it's great to be here, and we're really excited to be here. I'm really happy to be here with Anne and Esther, and actually we could conduct a board meeting right now because we have our entire board of 23andMe here assembled in Munich, which is really great. So just really quickly, just to give you some background on 23andMe, we launched our company in the US in November, and what we do is we enable individuals to make a personal choice to get access to their personal or to their genetic information. And we feel that this is a right that everybody should have, and what we do as a company is help people interpret that information. We put context around it, and we take what's coming out of the research community and give you that information in a way that you can understand. Because most people don't sit down and read Nature and Science and these publications that come out with these major findings. And so our mission is really to give people access to their information, and if they choose to, they can share that with others and connect with others and compare their genomes and find out where they're similar and get a better understanding of their own genetics and their ancestry, but also, what are their potential predispositions for diseases as we know now. This field is rapidly evolving. There are major publications coming out almost on a weekly basis now, which is very exciting. In fact, in the Broad Institute in Cambridge, Massachusetts, they've told us that they know of 60 major publications coming out in 2008. So there's going to be a flood of information coming forward, and we just want everyone who's interested to be able to have a better understanding of that and then apply that understanding to their own genetics.
Yeah, one of the big things that we also want to emphasize is that we feel we started this company because we want people to be able to get access to their information, but we also feel like there's a greater potential where if we can actually bring people together, we have the potential to really create a whole new avenue for research. And part of this is being based in Silicon Valley and being surrounded by all these user-generated companies, so companies like YouTube. We realize that there's this potential to empower people with information, really valuable information, and bring them together for a common good. So you can imagine, for instance, that you could get 1,000 individuals who all have migraines and are really interested in understanding what those genetics are, what drugs they actually respond to, why some people respond to the migraine drugs, some don't. So rather than actually just having a pharmaceutical company or specific researchers looking at small data sets, you have the ability to bring, let's say, 1,000 people together, aggregate that data, and then rather than having just one group look at that data, say a pharmaceutical company could look at this, researchers could look at this, it's the democratization of the data. So we feel like there's the potential, by bringing people together, to really significantly leverage those data sets by having multiple researchers analyzing those data sets at once. So the long-term goal of this company is really to dramatically accelerate the pace of research and to bring personalized medicine to a reality.
Okay. The reason I invested in 23andMe, other than that I think it's going to be a successful company, and I like the two founders, is that I think it's going to be an incredibly interesting ride. I think this company is going to raise lots of interesting questions. Many of them you may have in the audience right now. People really don't understand how their genes work. They think if their genes are made public, even to themselves, that's scary information. I personally am having my genes a more extensive sequence than 23andMe is doing, published on the internet along with my health records. Not because I think it's going to tell me that much interesting about myself, but because it's going to foster discussion and help people understand more what the issues are around genetic information. Right now, people don't understand if you have a single gene, it means very, very little. If you have 4 or 5 together, they interact. And then you may or may not have a higher or lesser probability of having some condition, whether it's diabetes or breast cancer. But it also depends on what you eat. It depends on what kinds of drugs you may take. There's so many different factors combined, and people don't understand that. So I'm hoping that this company is going to be an educational company, not just for our customers, who I hope will be many, but also for the public at large, that we'll raise questions about the interaction between your genetic information and your health insurance. Will knowing that you personally would benefit from such and such a diet make you behave better than simply knowing everybody should eat more broccoli? Is the fact that it's more personal going to make it more compelling? In our other sessions here, we talk about personalized information, relevant advertising. Why can't health information be more relevant as well? I think I'd like to stop there. I hope somebody's going to ask a question that will cause me to go to the computer and give you a little demo of what this stuff really looks like.
Maybe before we ask other questions, could you maybe outline exactly what type of diseases actually you can check whether somebody has an increased risk? I think that might be also interesting for the audience.
Okay, well, why don't I let Anne answer that question, and I'll just go show you something on the computer.
Yeah. So, yeah, we should emphasize that what we do is we give you access to your genetic information, but then we allow you to compare your genetic information to what the research world is generating. So you get this billions of dollars a year that is spent on research. We want people to be able to understand what does that research actually mean for them. So I should emphasize, we are not necessarily specifically targeting one disease or another, but we are a reflection of what the research world is generating.
So actually, Esther can go through the list that we currently have information on, and these are called gene journals. And the gene journals are a way for us to give information to you about the studies that have been published that we feel have met all of the criteria that qualify for a validated study. There could be publications that come out that our scientists look at and decide it's not quite ready for prime time, it's not really ready for the general public, and so we'll hold on to those until they've been further replicated or validated. So Esther, it's probably just easiest for you to go down that list.
Let me just show you. You can see now on the screen, this is what I mean by educational. Type 1 diabetes, it is 80% of your chance of getting type 1 diabetes is determined by your genes, as it shows here. And as you'll see, both my aunt and I have a slightly higher than normal risk of getting it. But in fact, that actual risk is very low. It's less than 1 in 100%. So even having a higher than normal risk of 75, or by the time you get to 50, most people who had type 1 diabetes are already dead. So the risk of having it when you're old is actually lower. That's interesting stuff, and it applies to me personally. Now let me show you type 2 diabetes, and then we'll move on. But I think this is a key example of the kind of personalized education, but not diagnosis, that we provide. So type 2 diabetes, your likelihood of getting it is determined only 25% by your genes, and a lot by how much you eat of that versus that. But here's the scary part. This is for young people. By the time you get to be 60, almost 10 out of 100 people get it. But remember, 75% of that chance depends on what you eat and how you behave rather than your genes. And making this kind of information tangible, personal, intelligible to people is what we're all about. And then we want to know more information about more genetic predispositions based on information we'll collect from our users with their permission. And that's the scientific research part.
So you can see from here, this is, that's one of our potentials is we start providing some of this information, but then we want to actually get information back from individuals because you might have type 2 diabetes, but not have any of those genes. And that
versions of
any
those
of those
genes.
versions of those genes. So that poses the question, well, are there other factors that are out there that potentially we can find? So research is a big mission of 23andMe.
So are there any questions from the floor?
Yeah. This one.
Okay, the gentleman over there.
Go ahead.
First, my name is Aram Davidson, and we just invested a significant amount of money in a company called Vervant. It's the fastest growing family tree in the world right now. And we want to offer this service to our users. We cannot. We tried. So one thing for you to think about. Secondly, there are many things I wouldn't like to know about myself. Like, I have a high chance of getting a heart attack at the age of 55, for example. But I will get it from you if I log into the service. And then my life will change immediately. I would probably, I can do many things I wouldn't like to do if I know such things and I have nothing to do about it. How can I be, how can I get only the good news or be able to deal with the bad news with your service?
So I'm sorry, I think you mentioned cardiovascular disease as a possibility.
Yeah, well, two questions. First, when are you going to offer this? When are you going to offer this service in Europe? So our big families, and we have millions of them now, will be able to log in and learn about themselves. And secondly, how to deal mostly from a mental point of view with the very bad information I'm going to get once I know the real chances.
So we actually had a press release this morning announcing that we've launched in Europe and Canada. So as of now, you can go in and order the service I think it's almost every European country. And as far as you being able to handle getting this information, what we've discovered in talking to our customers in the US so far is that because we're a reflection of what's going on in the research community, the differences are subtle. As Esther showed you, you might have a slight increased risk over average, but it's not dramatic, and that's because we're looking mostly at common diseases, and the genetics of common diseases are combinations of many genes, and what we're showing you is just the earliest discoveries that are coming out in the research literature. There's a lot more work to be done, and this is not clinical by any stretch of the imagination. It's all research information, and so our goal is really to partner with all of you to get information from you about, do you have type 2 diabetes? Do these markers reflect that? And if they don't, that means we have a lot more discovery to do. So we see this as a research mission and a way to partner with places like the Max Planck and the Karolinska and the Broad Institute in the US to create a greater cohort of people coming together and sharing their information. So, but again, we found that once our customers get access to their data, they can handle it very well. And we've really not had very many requests for help in that, like you say, the mental part of digesting this information. If anything, people are telling us they want more. And that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, we had a very interesting session of our scientific advisory board. Our scientific advisory board is well-known geneticists who are really smart and know a lot, and they were very concerned that we would be too consumer-oriented and, you know, not serious enough and give people too much information they couldn't understand. And then when they got their own results back, suddenly their attitude changed and they said, wow, this is exciting. Tell us more. We know that it's only probabilities. It doesn't really mean much, and we know it's not all scientifically vetted. But put in all these caveats that this is only tentative information, but tell us everything. And that's how I feel now that I've seen mine.
I think also, you know, for areas like heart disease, there is that potential where there's a big lifestyle component, and potentially you get this information, you see that your genotype is associated with an increased risk. So does that make you want to eat better? Does that make you want to exercise more? And for some areas where there's not specific things that you could do, so something like multiple sclerosis, hopefully by gathering all this information, in 5 to 10 years, there will actually be more things. So again, that's part of our goal, is it's something that we really hope empowers those individuals to say, okay, we want something that's different in 5 to 10 years from now. We don't want to just say there's nothing to do. We really want to push research, and that's a driving mission. That's why we started this. When we, 20 years from now, if I have some condition, I want to be able to have personalized medicine associated with it, and I want to have an option, a significantly greater number of therapy options.
Okay, there's a question there.
Hi, I love the idea of this, and I think people will make their own choices about how much they want to know about their future. What I would be concerned about is, how are you going to protect, if I choose to find this out, how are you going to protect the consumer's privacy? The almighty insurance companies in the United States, and certainly the great thing called the Patriot Act that we all know about, how are you going to protect against individuals' privacy when I really don't want anybody else knowing about the risks that my life might hold for me?
So we think a lot about privacy, and we recognize that privacy is a major concern for our customers. I think there's been good models out there. So for instance, the banking industry, online photo storage, those are both two industries where privacy has been big issues, and there's a lot that we can learn from that. As of today, I would have a much greater incentive trying to find out your banking information than your genetic information. So we've actually, we just actually had an internal security audit, and it came out with flying colors that we are one of the most, we've been one of the most cautious, secure companies that they have actually ever reviewed. So we recognize it's extremely important for individuals. One of the other things that's important to emphasize is that there's the term chain of custody, where you might purchase a kit, but you might have your brother do it. So we can't necessarily guarantee that the name that's associated is actually that person's genotype. So it's not, we do not envision something like insurance companies, and all the feedback that we get is that this is not something that insurance companies are going to want to be going after. Hopefully in the future is that this actually becomes, the information becomes clinical enough that it has some predictive values, and this could eventually help you get preventative treatment earlier if you wanted it.
One other point, even if I'm an insurance company, I'd much rather take a look at you, look at your body mass index, ask you whether you smoke, ask you whether what age your parents died. They're not getting that precise. I think over the long term, the U.S. insurance industry has to change everything, but that's a longer story. And I do think genetic information will be part of that change, and we're leading it.
Maybe we should talk also about the other things you are doing, the other genetic traits. It's not all about diseases, but it's also, I think, Linda, you pointed that out yesterday, it's also about ancestry. And I think this is the fun part, actually. So why don't you kind of tell us a little bit more about this part?
So when we first started the company, we thought it was really important to have access to all of your genetic information, including your mitochondria. And mitochondria is what we all inherit from our mothers, and it comes all down through the maternal line. And by having access to that information, it can give you great insight into your deep ancestry or your ancient ancestry. And that's been one of the really fun things for all of us. Anne and I are both linked to almost 30 different people, and you can see what the maternal haplogroup assignment is, meaning, you know, you can kind of trace your ancestry all the way around the world, wherever your maternal line came from, all the way back to Africa, because we all originally came from there, of course. And of course, my husband has a different haplogroup assignment than I do, and he's different than my children. So when you actually see the data working and you see this coming to fruition by looking at your genes, it's fascinating. And so we do a lot of these fun comparisons. And when you find out someone shares your haplogroup, you feel a kinship with them, even though they may live on the other side of the world. And it just provides a way of connecting with people in a very interesting way. The additional thing we do is we have a database of over 1,000 individuals that you are compared to, and this is what we call global similarity. And this just compares your genome to these different people who are clustered into about 52 populations, and you can find out which population are you most similar to. But what we'd like to do at 23andMe is really expand upon this database and get more people in as references. And this is really hard to do in the US because we're all mutts. We're all mixtures of a lot of different cultures and societies, whereas if we can find people who especially know where their 4 grandparents are from in a part of the world, those people could end up being references for that geography. And so with time, this information is just going to get richer and richer, and you'll be able to see more and more who you're more similar to.
And I'd have to show you this one. I think this is the single best marketing tool we have for the grandparents to see how much of each grandparent shows up in each grandchild. The 2 grandparents are on top. There's a grandchild at the bottom. And as you know, every parent contributes half the child's genes, but each grandparent contributes approximately 25%, but it could be more or less. And in this case, my nephew gets 56% of his maternal DNA from my father and 44% from my stepmother. Every grandparent should have this.
Any more questions?
He was asking over here too. Is there a
Who
mic?
was first?
Let's get, he flowed out.
My name is Christian Stack and I work for German news site Spiegel Online. I have to come back to the disease thing, sorry, but it strikes me, it seems like you're making people pay to give them reasons to do the things that they should be doing anyway. I mean, we should all eat better, we should all do more sports, and now you're telling me you should do it because of that. But I give you money for that. It's odd business model, isn't it?
Well, this is more about learning more about our genomes too. So it's not so much that that you're going to suddenly start eating better and exercising. Although we have found in our early studies that we did with our alpha testers, there was one guy who was overweight, but he found out his profile across some of the obesity genes, and he signed up for a marathon. I mean, it really does have different impact when you know it's there, and even though we all know we're supposed to take better care of ourselves, for some people it can really trigger them to change their behavior. But this is more about how do we all come together and learn more about things that will improve our lives in ways that, beyond just exercise and eating well. For instance, as Anne mentioned, we really want to move into the area of personalized medicine, and the notion of pharmacogenetics is really in its infancy. And I worked for a company that was trying to do pharmacogenetic studies with pharmaceutical companies, and we just were not making any progress because our cohorts were too small. We weren't looking at enough people who were on the drugs. Whereas if we can look across the globe, pharmaceutical companies sell their drugs globally now, so if we can learn from people taking these drugs and find out who are those few people, the needles in a haystack, who have a really severe reaction, then we can take that information back to the medical community eventually, hopefully, and use that in an informative way.
Okay, there was a question over there.
Sex? Did he say sex? I don't know. Okay. My question relates to DNA as information set. As you and others amass thousands, then tens of thousands, millions of strands of DNA genomic sequences, this is obviously a huge data set. Can you talk a bit about your vision in terms of, one, I assume it's an open architecture so you can connect with other genomic data sets, so you can search across and manipulate across data sets. Two, what does the search engine look like that interface with this, both for a researcher as well as for a consumer, I mean, obviously this is more than just keyword searching. This is a very different kind of search in terms of both sequences, relationships, and other data sets that you bring in from behavioral and other types of data.
So, good questions. I would say that we're actually the infancy of searching your genome. We have, Esther's going to demonstrate, we have something called the Genome Explorer, which lets you search your genome based on gene or SNP. We recognize at some point, most people don't know gene names and most people don't know SNP numbers. You want to usually search on something like blue eyes, or you want to search on migraines. So that's something that will come over time. In terms of your first question, in terms of creating an open architecture, one of the things that we're really excited about and we really support is that all these large genome-wide association studies are now being required to put that data out there. So that's something that that really only helps us, where we realize that there's going to be amazing research tools out there for researchers.
So what we've done here is we just did a search on actinin 3, which is a gene we all have, and the different versions of Esther and her aunt, I believe. Their different SNPs that are in that gene are showing up now just simply by doing a gene name search. We can also do searches on SNPs. So we have a lot of geneticists now.
Maybe you should briefly outline what SNP means. I don't know whether everybody is aware of the term
SNP just is a very long name for a very simple idea, but it's a single nucleotide polymorphism. It's just a single point change in your genome, and we're studying the ones that have been very well characterized in the human genome, where we know humans differ. We're all about 99.5% the same, but what makes us different is partly the SNPs are partly responsible for that. So by studying these areas, that's why with common diseases, the research community has the theory that common disease is related to common SNPs, because these genes or these diseases are showing up in a lot of different populations. So by studying the common SNPs, we may be able to find patterns that associate with those. And so you can simply just browse through your chromosomes. It's a very simple interface. I don't know if you've ever played with the UC Santa Cruz Genome Explorer. It's scary, even to geneticists. So this is a very simple interface, and we plan to continue to expand on this.
Sorry, I have a question, if that's okay, which is, in the sociobiology literature, I believe it's the case that somewhere between 5 and 20% of people are born to a father that is not their real father. And maybe in your demographic, it's slightly closer to 5 to 10%. It's not sort of inner city poor people. But have you had a situation yet where someone's found out that their dad is not really their dad? And how do you anticipate customer reaction when a significant portion of your customers will find out they're not related to their family that they thought they were?
Yeah, that's something that we raise in our consent form right off the bat, that when someone is considering signing up for this service, that is something they may find out, not only that your dad isn't your dad, but also that your ancestry isn't what you expected. So it's absolutely something that will happen. We haven't heard of it happening yet, but undoubtedly we will run into that. But in some cases, I think a lot of families sometimes have an inkling that they know that this is the case, and the data may demonstrate this. But as Anne was saying, this is, we don't have chain of custody, and then we also don't really have any insight into who our customers are. We keep that very private, even internally within 23andMe. So there could be people in this room, well, because we've just launched in Europe, maybe not, but there are people who've signed up that we're not even aware of. So we haven't heard anything, though.
Yes.
My name is Ulrike from Focus Magazine. I want to know a little bit more about personalized medicine, so that in the future I get a disease and I've got a choice of treatments, and I know only 50% of the people will react to a certain kind of chemotherapy or other drugs. So will you be able to tell me if I need to take this chemotherapy or another therapy, or if I rather take something different?
Yeah, this is an area that we're really interested in. An example that many of you might be able to relate to is Benadryl, where I don't know how many people in this room have taken Benadryl, but some percentage of people makes them very sleepy, and some percentage of people it actually makes them very hyper. So many new parents go on long flights and give their child a little bit of Benadryl, and they have a horrible reaction when they find out that they've just actually made their child very hyper for a 10-hour flight in the middle row. So we recognize that there's, this is an area that we'd really like to advance. There's specific severe adverse events that we'd be interested in. One of the things that we've talked about is statins. Statins are widely taken by a large number of people, and there is a very small percentage that has a severe adverse event. And I think that's one of the things that we would like to do is be able to genotype those people who've had a severe adverse event, see if we could identify what is it that caused them to have a severe adverse event, and then could you potentially have a diagnostic to prevent people. So there's a lot of instances. We talk frequently even about antibiotics. They know, there's a good number of people who have a severe adverse event when they take an antibiotic. It would be great if you could know that before having to go through experience of having a severe adverse event.
Or what type of cancer you have. That also will affect the treatment, and your genes will indicate which type of cancer it might be.
I've got a really good one for you, Anne and Linda. Okay, you just sent us some kits. Thank you very much for our kids and my partner and I. But we were sitting there wondering, we each had a baby, used an anonymous donor, but we're not going to have his spit because we don't know him. How would we find anything out? I mean, we're kind of like, because we'll only have the mother line. So, but we can see with the two boys who are related. So we're confused as to what we'll find out, kind of stuff.
Let's put the
but the
IBD
boys will
back
be
up.
related because they have a common father. Ooh, you have a special crazy lesbian that's in San Francisco slide?
For you will create anything.
Okay.
So you will actually, the two boys will be able to compare themselves to each other. So, and we will pull that up so you can actually see what a sibling comparison looks like. When you have your parents in it as well, and that's what you have to pay for yourself, when you have that in there yourself, you'll be able to actually see then what came through from your parents, and sort of through, by seeing what came through from them, you'll be able to deduce what came through from the other side.
Just so you can see here, this is an actual brother-sister pair, my father and my aunt. And now I'm going to show you a half sibling, which is me and one of my half-sisters. So you saw a lot of similarity. That was the dark stuff. And
so this
here,
is just a representation of your 23 chromosomes. So you can see all of the areas in this light blue color are where you're half similar. And the other one that Esther was showing is if you've got two full siblings, they may have parts of their genomes in common that are 100% identical. So this is just a way to visualize that. And so for your sons, they would, we'd be able to see where they're identical.
so your sons are going to look like this because they're half brothers. And your sister or somebody is going to look like, sorry.
You can do it if you don't have other information.
Yes.
I think we are
And
running out
you
of...
can do your parents and then do the grand tree.
We are running out of time. Maybe we should have one or two more questions.
Do you do these analyses only for living people? Because there are a number of fascinating historical unanswered questions that you could probably answer.
So that's actually, right now we're currently only extracting saliva from living people. We've definitely had interest from individuals whether or not they could genotype individuals who've passed away. That's a research question right now. That's not something that we're able to do, but we recognize that it would be a fascinating thing to do. And if you have more.
Still, I think, like always, this service is offered for the people that can afford it. $999, right? But we all, especially in this great event, think about how making the world a better place. And the people that need your service most will never be able to afford it. They are in Africa, in India, in Asia. What can you do to help these guys over there with your great service?
Well, one of the things, and again, one of the areas that we want to go into is research. And being in the U.S., we, because we're such a melting pot, we have people that represent a lot of the parts of the world. So what we can learn from our African American population, from our Asian population, could translate and transfer into other countries and people who can't afford it. The cost will drop over time, so it will get more affordable. The other thing we're doing is we're targeting specific disease areas where we're going to raise funds to pay for the cost. So, for example, in autism is a hugely complicated disease, and one of our SAB members, our Scientific Advisory Board members, has been studying autism for over 20 years, and still we don't know the genetics. And the conclusion he came to is that we need to genotype at least 20,000 kids before we're going to determine anything genetically. So what we'd like to do is we're going to start raising funding, and there's a lot of interest in the US, and I'm sure there is here in Europe as well, to really enroll as many people as we possibly can and raise the funding for that. So we're talking to people like Jim Simons in the US. He runs a hedge fund. He's already contributed, I think, $30 million to the research of autism, and there's people like that in the US. Michael J. Fox is studying Parkinson's, obviously, because he came down with that disease. We could work with him to fund studies. There's a number of disease areas that we would like to help other people get involved without having to pay themselves.
Yeah, we definitely recognize there's the potential for a genetic divide, and very early on it's become our mission to make sure that that is something that the company takes responsibility for and helps solve. So we've allocated a certain percentage of our financing to help relieve these types of things. So, but we recognize it's an important question.
We have to stop here, I think.
Okay.
Maybe one more sentence.
Just the major message is
No, we have
this
to
is
stop.
partly a physical device that's done by an independent lab, and we pay them. That's going to be a commodity service, and it's going to get cheaper and cheaper over time. At the same time, our service, it's digital, so the more users we have, the less it will cost us for each one. So over time, it's going to get much, much cheaper. And at the same time, the information is going to get much richer, both for individuals and medically. So it's just like 20 years ago, the PC cost $8,000 and it didn't do much. And in the future, it's going to cost much, much less and do a lot more.
Okay, thank you all for coming.
Thank
the
you.
three of you. It was really a wonderful
Wonderful.
discussion.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay.
This was a real digital live design session. Thank you. And now
you.
Marcel. Please, okay.
Yeah.